Welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Betty Chen. The issue of low birth rates has become a matter of national security in many countries in East Asia. In 2023, South Korea's fertility rate was strikingly low at 0.72 children per woman, totaling only 230,000 births. It was the lowest fertility rate in the world. And in response, President Yoon Suk-yeol has declared a population emergency. Similarly, Japan has reported a population decrease of over 830,000, the largest decline since 1950. Taiwan and China are also experiencing population declines. Today, we will explore the implications of population shrinkage and aging in East Asia and how these demographic changes will affect regional economies and reshape the global landscape. Joining us today are Chien Yi-chun, National Chengchi University Department of Political Science Assistant Professor, and Amelie Kaiser-Verreau, European Research Center on Contemporary Taiwan Postdoctoral Fellow. A warm welcome to both of you on the show. Thank you very much. So let's start with today's conversation. The United Nations predicts that the population of China, Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan will decrease by 8 to 18% over the next few decades. So talking about these numbers, could you please tell us what's the significance of this huge drop of population? We start with Emily, please.
Thank you. Of course, for a country, the plummeting birth rate represents a crisis, the so-called national security crisis, as the Taiwanese government once called it. Because for a state, the imbalance between older people and young people, so the workforce, will be not sustainable in the future and in the current economic climate. But this is only one way at looking at things, and there are other perspectives and interpretation. So indeed, low fertility means also that our vision of family, marriage, and what is a good life is different from the previous generation. It has considerably changed in the last decade. So marriage and parenthood are increasingly becoming a conscious choice rather than just a normative step in one's life. So what I mean here is, for example, for our grandmother, it was not a question of choice to have children or not. They get married and it was implicit that they will become mothers. But nowadays it's different, we can choose, and more often than not, becoming parents is a project. In addition, according to the theory of the second demographic transition, modernization and industrialization lead to an emphasis on personal needs, fulfillment. For example, some researchers mentioned Maslow's pyramid, arguing that the country development produces a shift in value from material needs, for example, physiological needs, for example, to be able to eat and to have housing, to non-material needs. So, for example, including self-fulfillment. And I am currently conducting a large-scale project about the family in Taiwan. And many of the young people who are of childbearing age, so between 25 and 45 years old, for many of them, their life quality is very important, and they don't necessarily want to rush into marriage and becoming parents because they think that this might negatively impact their life quality. Therefore, to some extent, low fertility could be seen as a kind of social progress in which we have the choice to be single or not, to get married or not, to have children or not. And this is, of course, not a bad thing. But the problem in Taiwan and East Asia is that the birth rate is extremely low. Mm-hmm. So we are going toward hyper-aging societies.
Mm-hmm. Yi-chun, what's your take on this?
Just to follow up on the point on the hyper-aging society, I think one important thing we have to think about is not only we see the problem of the really decreasing fertility rates, also we're seeing like rapidly aging society in the East Asia. So basically, I can provide a number right now. So Taiwan, South Korea, and Japan are really like rapidly aging, facing the problem of rapidly aging society. So in 5 years' time, Taiwan and South Korea will have over 25% of the population will be over the age of 65. That means 1 in the 5 people you meet on the street will be we consider elderly people. And Japan has already reached that point. Currently, their aging population or their age population who are over the age of 65 is around 29% already. And another statistic shows that 1 in 10 people in Japan is over age of 80. So basically, not only we see fewer and fewer babies, we're seeing more and more senior citizens. And that has a lot of implications. For example, we are seeing the shrinking of working population, which we see more of the senior citizens in the East Asia societies. And demographic projections suggest that within 10 years' time, we'll be losing around 15% of the working population in the next 10 years. So basically, you're going to see a lot of different industries calling for a labor shortage. They don't have enough workers right now, so they are facing serious problems. And at the same time, we have to look at how this aging population is shaping. Actually, we have to reconstruct our welfare system. So, for example, the current welfare system is based on we have like big enough working population to provide tax and to pay for the national health insurance, so we can cover those ones who are retired, receiving pensions, or being sick at home. So we can maintain the current structure. But we are predicting we have aging problem right now. So, and we have shrinking working population. So in the future, the burden, the dependency ratio will be increasing exponentially, and also, like the financial burden of this government to provide adequate care for the elderly senior population will be like more and more severe in the next couple of years.
So both of you have touched upon a wide range of issues. For example, you talk about the choice that we have and also the issues and welfare. So we will talk about them one by one later. Low birth rates are a key cause of population decline. According to the CIA's 2024 Global Fertility Rate Forecast, Taiwan ranks last among the 227 countries surveyed, with South Korea second to last and other Asian countries, such as Japan, also ranking near the bottom. So how do we interpret these figures? I would like to echo what Emily said. You just mentioned the population decline can be seen as a way to show that we have social progress, because now women, especially women, have the choice. They can decide, not just like our grandmothers, they can choose to get married or not. In the past, when we see the occurrence of population decline, that's usually due to external factors like war or famine. It's like not voluntary. But now it seems that people have the choice. So the population decline is like a result of voluntary choices. So how do you interpret this kind of changes, Emily?
Yes, it's the result of voluntary changes, but also economic factor, but not just economic factor. So I think that a common problem in East Asian societies, including Taiwan, is the persistence of gender inequality and patriarchal systems. So many researchers have pointed out that Taiwan gender equality indicator, such as the number of women in the parliament or marriage equity, appear to be very good. So Taiwan is a pioneer in gender equity on the international scene, especially in Asia. These indicators are obviously very important, and Taiwanese people and activists have fought hard to achieve this result, and we can just be happy of those achievements. However, some studies also indicate that there is a big gap between gender equity in the public and private sphere. So we can simplify by saying that in the public sphere, we can see Taiwan's significant progress and achievement in gender equity. But in the private sphere, so many people, young and old, still hold traditional values. So for example, son preference, or stereotypes, gender stereotypes, or deterministic idea, like the fact that a woman should do this should be this, and a man should do that and be that. So in this context, inequalities between men and women remain very significant, particularly within the family. And I've written an article about the fact that for many urban and highly educated women, they see that undertaking a family project will impact, for example, their career, their aspiration quite negatively. So, of course, this is not always the case. For example, if we take Northern Europe or other countries that have invested significantly in policies and initiatives supporting parenthood and also gender equity, we see that women's self-fulfillment is not necessarily contradictory with care work, particularly motherhood. But in the absence of sufficient policies and help from the government, it becomes difficult for women to undertake a family project. So this is one element. Another element that I would like to talk about is that the current demographic crisis is also linked to the ultra-rapid modernization of East Asia and Taiwan, so what we call compressed modernity in sociology, which has resulted in women bearing most of the care work for decades. So in order to pursue rapid modernization in the 60s and 70s, the East Asian state have put a lot of resources in economic development, which has resulted in the economic miracles that we know nowadays. We all know about the East Asian economic miracles. But on the other side, it was done at the expense of social welfare. And that left all the care work to the family and especially to women. So this developmental strategy, as known as institutionalized familism, is a result of that kind of development. And housewives from the older generation had to carry that very heavy house chore and care responsibility, not just looking after their own children, but also taking care of all the dependents. So, for example, the older people, would it be their in-laws or own parents? So many older women do not look back fondly on these ordeals nowadays. And for example, I met many young people, and they told me in Taiwan that there is a very different attitude between their mothers and their fathers regarding marriage. So, for example, sometimes their mothers told them that they are not obliged to get married, and maybe it's better not to get married, but for their father, maybe they are holding more traditional values and hope that their daughters will get married. So we see here the difference, between, because those older women had to bear all that burden of the care work. Yeah.
So thank you, Emily, for sharing with us your perspectives, and I would like to echo and also direct my question to Yi-chun. You talk about actually the gender roles and also work-life balance, which can cause a huge burden on women. So what's your, for example, personal experience or your observation about women in Taiwan or in East Asia?
So we'll talk broadly about East Asia, and then I will zoom into Taiwan to share my personal experience with you. So first, I think I like Emily mentioned about the compressed modernity, and welfare scholars or social policy scholars like to talk about East Asia as a very familialistic welfare state, which, put the jargon aside, which means the government expects families, especially women, to take on care responsibility for whatever happened in a family. For example, child rearing is women's responsibility. Sick parents is the women's responsibility. So basically, because we have to industrial and modernize in a very condensed and compressed period of time, the government during the time in the 80s doesn't have enough resources to provide any welfare services to the families, and they just say, oh, you family figure that out yourself. So even until today, I think what a lot of NGOs have conduct research about if you have a sick parent at home, who is most likely to take care of that parent? So the response is family members / women. More than 60% will be female family member will be taking care of the sick parent.
The daughter-in-law or the daughters
or daughter,
in the family.
unmarried daughters,
and
daughter-in-law, and actually the daughter themselves. So the care responsibility has been beyond women for the entire time in East Asia. And also, even though we have the migrant care workers, they only compose around 20% of the responsibilities. And the government claim they have long-term care plan, but they only account for 10%. So roughly you can see how care responsibility or care needs are actually rely on female family member to provide care for the families. So that's the first thing I think. In East Asia in general, not only in Taiwan, I think in South Korea have the same tendency. The women in the family are expected to provide care whenever who has the need. So at the same time, I like to echo your earlier point about is a voluntary choice to not have babies, because we see in Taiwan and South Korea, we have one of the highest women educational level around the world. But at the same time, in South Korea, they have the biggest gender wage gap. So, in terms of equality between gender, I think South Korea have a much more serious problem than Taiwan right now. So if I can give you the statistics on the table, I think they just published the newest data in South Korea. The birth rate or fertility rate in South Korea this year in 2024 is 0.68. I think become the lowest in the world, without a doubt. And I've been talking with a lot of feminist Korean scholars. They said, that's really echo what they are observing in their society. Whereas Taiwan, we at around 0.86. So slightly higher, but not, it's not any better at this point. We are competing for the bottom two in the lowest fertility rates.
Nothing to be proud of.
Yeah, no, it's a terrible competition, but it's a competition between South Korea and Taiwan. And I think we have both facing the same problem. We have like really high level of education for the women, but like the gender wage gap, and also the traditional expectation of women to provide care has not changed in the past couple of years, despite the fact women are receiving higher education, maybe they have more equity at work, but when they go back home, they're still the person everybody expecting to provide for care whenever somebody's have the needs. So, and I think that's a major problem that kind of contributing to this low fertility rates problem, because women are working this second shift. If after they get off the work, they go back home, they start their second shift as a care provider for the family at home. So to share my personal experiences, I am mother of a 2-year-old daughter, and I feel like I never have a break. So from 9 to 6, even though we haven't, we have the access to a nanny, and then she has been amazing in helping me. But after I get home from 6, that'll be my responsibility to take care of my daughter. So I feel like I've been nonstop working for the entire 2 years. My daughter was born, and I have been lacking sleep the entire time. So basically, women's responsibility and expectation nowadays are still, I said, quite traditional, has not been changed too much in the past couple years.
So now that we have understood the current situation, it is indeed a very serious problem. Are there any pro-natal policies adopted by governments in East Asia in order to reverse the situation, and how have they been working so far? Emily.
Yeah, thanks for the question. I like to point out that Taiwan birth rate is just around 0.8, around 1. So, which doesn't mean that young couple dare to give birth just to one children. In fact, if we look at those figures, there are two possibilities. One is just that every couple has only one children, and the other possibility is that 50% of couple have 2 children, and there is another 50% of people who do not have children at all. And Taiwan is clearly closer to the second possibility. So indeed, most couples have children after marriage, and there's even around 70% of couples who have 2 or more. So in other words, until recent year, the average number of children born to married women were around 2. So it remained relatively stable. And the drop in the fertility rate is because more and more people decide to not, or just don't get married. They decide or not, maybe it's not their choice, but are not getting married. So in fact, only it's important to put into context that in Taiwan, there is just around 3 to 4% of children that are born out of wedlock. So from a statistical point of view, or even socially to some extent, marriage is still a prerequisite in the Taiwanese society for people to have children. So now if we look at the incentive policies, not only did many Taiwanese young people I met told me that current policies are not enough to encourage them to have a child, but also that the government's thinking of insensitive encouraging young people to have a second or even a third child by promising more subsidies, maybe it's not the best strategy, since people who get married generally will have children. However, the government needs to move into the right direction and understand why more and more people are reluctant to become parents. And if the government wants to people to have children, it must work to alleviate the pressure on young people. So this could be done, for example, by offering child-free care, sufficient and long paid maternity and also father leaves, also encouraging flexible working culture and flexible hours, for example, campaign raising awareness on the importance of gender equity in the family, also providing affordable housing solutions. So there is a lot of things that can be done about the low fertility, the low birth rate. So in this way, becoming a parent could be desirable and even enjoyable and not necessarily a burden, especially for women.
Yi-chun, what do you think about the current government policies adopted in Asia to address this issue?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So scholar or research has shown that if we have like high quality and affordable daycare, or we call it early child education facilities, or we just call daycare, if we have good quality and affordable daycare, actually associate with higher birth rate. And we are learning examples from Nordic countries. But unfortunately, so far, what we see in the East Asia context, government are not investing enough in creating the environment that is necessary for the couples or married couples or women to have the incentive to have more children. So for example, although I'm saying, South Korea is now the bottom, but I did some research about their policy arrangement. Maybe we can learn from, sometimes the failed examples.
Right, exactly.
So they have established low birth rate and aging society committee directly under the president in the 2006. That's way before our Taiwanese policy approach. I think Taiwan started from 2017, so 10 years behind them. But still, I think
it's not working, right?
It's not working, yeah. So they're suffering more. So what they have done is they use cash benefits. So they provide different cash benefit. For example, there's a Good Mother's Card. They put money in this Good Mother's Card. So basically, they got financial allowance for mothers. They increase year by year, and apparently what you can see right now is not working quite well. So they think about, maybe we can change the gender roles. So they create this policy called Daddy's Month. So daddy with a newborn, they can have 1 month fully paid parental leave. So they're saying, we encourage men to take on more responsibilities to help childcare at home, and then they increase, in the future you can use the parental leave for men as well. But unfortunately, we're seeing, in South Korea's context, only 7% of the newborn fathers are actually taking that leave. So even we provide generous cash benefits or financial benefits, I don't think that's the right incentive to actually solve the problem of the low fertility rates. And Taiwan right now, I think unfortunately we're seeing the same tendencies. So it doesn't matter which government, they always think about, we should increase the child allowance or mother's allowances. They provide more subsidies every month. And, increasingly, we're talking about, should we increase more money? But then at the same time, as I talked about when I first answered your question, I think affordable and good quality daycare actually is what mothers are thinking about most helpful, according to scholars' research, to provide more incentive. Not so much about just the money.
So definitely there is one fit-for-all solution. And I think in addition to the childcare policies, I think the overall environment, like rising housing prices and inflation and like living costs and all these things are preventing people from having children. So some people are saying that in the future, if you look at a situation in the United States, in the next 20 years, they can see steady population growth and because of their immigration policy. Do you think that if the Asian countries adopt a similar immigration policy, will that help us reverse the trend?
Yeah. So basically, I think the government sees this trend right now. We are seeing a rapid change in the immigration policy in East Asia, specifically in the last couple of years. So in the past, scholars usually think that East Asia countries are very ethnically homogeneous society. It's hard for them to receive new immigrants. But at the policy level, we actually see more and more open and more inclusive policy arrangement. For example, in Japan, they are creating this specified skill worker policies, which is aiming at what we call 3D jobs, the low blue-collared workers. If they work and pass certain exams, they can have access to permanent residence in Japan. So that's really counterintuitive when we think about Japan being very, I think, homogeneous society. sometimes they don't like outsiders, right? But at the policy level, I think the government really sensed the urgencies of the shrinking population, so they open their arms to accept different immigrants. Taiwan in a very similar trend. We have in 2023 we have this mid-skilled worker policies. We're also trying to facilitate access to long-term settlements for what we call the blue-collar workers, for example, in construction, in agriculture, and also including long-term care. So I think government all sense the urgency that really need to revise our immigration policies to kind of reverse this shrinking population trend.
Emily, what's your take on this?
Yes, I think, of course, immigration is a very big issue in Asia, but there is also other groups of people that may want to become parents, and the current policies and legislation in Taiwan make that difficult for them. I think of single women who do not have access to the national sperm bank, and also they cannot use their frozen eggs if they are not married. But there is many highly educated single women who would like to become a parents, but not necessarily to get married.
Also same-sex couples and also adoption, right?
Exactly, the LGBTQ plus community and queer parenting. Of course, Taiwan is a pioneer for marriage equality, but we can only hope that the access to parenthood will be more and more easy for queer families. Yeah.
And final question, do you think that along with the line of population decline, do you think there is still some stigma over the role of women? So that's keeping women from getting into marriage and having kids in East Asia?
Yes, I think so. At least from my research, many women told me that they don't think that it's possible to manage a career and the burden of care work. And we just talk about all those childcare. Of course, there is childcare in Taiwan, but it's very, very expensive, and the hours where the service is provided do not necessarily suit the hours of that those women need to go to work.
Thank you very much. That's all the time we have for today. If you like our show, please search for us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up, and hit subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching our show today. Stay safe and see you next time.